always love it because I get to come on with music in the background, which is just plain exciting for me. But welcome everyone. Welcome to Connection versus Collision, and specifically the series that we've been doing for the last 4 months. This is the fourth month. Is the black and white conversation. And I'll never forget getting to sit around the table with Coach and others trying to think this through. What do we call it? What do we call it? And I love what Coach said. He's like, it is a black and white conversation. We just need to talk about it, you know? And so that's what we've been doing, which has been exciting, which has been maybe a little uncomfortable at times. Real quick, if you could, just go ahead and bring up that chat. You got your phone there. You know, just go over to... I'm looking at myself. There we go. Oh, welcome everybody. If you can go to that chat and let us know where you are watching in from, where you're engaging from, because we would love to hear about it. We got a great program for today. Those that are on Facebook as well, if you can just comment in below, that would be great. And that's a perfect place to go and put questions out there while we're going through our conversation. But right now, man, I want to bring on a guy who's got a game on Friday, which is extremely exciting. What's up, Coach Kemp?
Hey, how's everybody doing, man? I'm so excited. Listen, not just because we play a game, right, this Friday. It is exciting that we are playing a game. But I'm just excited, man. The sun is shining outside. It's like that fall weather to where it's not as hot as it was, but at the same time, you can pull out a hoodie, you know, and everybody likes a good hoodie. So I'm excited about that. Excited about, man, just us continuing this conversation because we know that it's needed. And again, what we want to do is we're not presenting ourselves necessarily as experts because we're not, but what we want to do is we want to make sure that we connect and not collide over the conversation that is the black and white conversation. And so excited to be with my guests, my panelists today, and excited about them. So we're going to have a good time today, and we're doing this a little different. So we're kind of together, if you will, in this space, but just wanted to kind of say thank you all again for coming back and being with us. We're going to continue our conversation as we always do. But before we get into our conversation, I want to give you all an opportunity to introduce yourselves, and I'm going to start with the lady first, Sister Grant.
Hi, you want me to introduce myself?
Please do. And who do you represent today? Where do you work? Where do you have your ministry?
That's a couple of different answers. But my name is Jocelyn Grant. I work at South Street Ministries. I'm the education and volunteer director there, as well as several other things that I engage in there to serve our community in Summit Lake and South Akron. I serve in ministry in a few capacities outside of South Street, and just excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you. Everybody else is muted. These are two of the most talkative brothers that I know that are now being bashful and not saying anything. So I want to see who speaks up first.
I want to give the judge an opportunity.
Actually, the bishop always takes precedence.
Bishop Joey Johnson, senior pastor of the House of the Lord, presiding bishop of Bethel Fellowship of Visionary Churches, and a whole bunch of other stuff.
All right, my name is Tom Parker. I am currently working in Cleveland, Ohio as a United States magistrate judge. Previously, I served in Summit County as a common pleas court judge. I've been a lawyer for 40 plus years, maybe as long as Bishop Johnson's been at the house of the Lord. In any event, where's my ministry? It's occurred in various places over the years through my church and community organizations, just in different ways. I've never been in professional ministry. It's always been through the opportunities that get provided in church and in the community.
Awesome. So we're going to lean a little bit in today to something that happened last summer but it became more relevant because we, if you will, got some behind the scenes, or either, I wouldn't even say behind the scenes, but we got some front scene footage about this. And Masai Ujiri, who is the president of basketball operations for the Toronto Raptors, was involved in an incident last summer to where something happened. And, you know, it's kind of one of those things where we didn't necessarily get the whole story of it, but the whole story of it just recently came out. And we just want to show you this video clip really quick because this is what we're going to lean into to continue our conversation in this and just kind of where this goes. So just stay tuned.
Between Raptors president Masai Ujiri and a San Francisco Bay Area sheriff's deputy was released last night. The footage is really jarring. It shows the deputy, Alan Strick.
Oops. Sorry about that. Let's try that again.
That's all right.
It's all right. Happens, right? Looking good.
Between Raptors president Masai Ujiri and a San Francisco Bay Area
Man, we don't want to see Ben, man. We want to see this clip. Hold on. we are testing out our breakfast stuff. So
between Raptors president Masai Ujiri and a San Francisco Bay Area sheriff's deputy was released last night. The footage is really jarring. It shows the deputy, Alan Strickland, grabbing Ujiri by the suit jacket twice.
Oh, my bad, guys. Hold on. We've now restarted it once.
Between Raptors president Masai Ujiri and a San Francisco Bay Area sheriff's deputy was released last night. The footage is really jarring. It shows the deputy, Alan Strickland, grabbing Ujiri by the suit jacket twice, shoving him twice. This is as Masai was reaching to take out his credential.
Oh, wow.
Between Raptors president Masai Ujiri and a
All right.
San Francisco
So,
Bay Area sheriff.
The clip is showing something that happened. Maybe you have already seen it, but Masai Ujiri, who is the president of basketball operations for the Toronto Raptors, was trying to get on the basketball court to celebrate with the team he helped to construct to win this championship. And he was met with opposition from one of the sheriffs that was there. And kind of just, you saw a brief clip where he was literally shoved twice to where he wasn't allowed on after attempting to show his ID. And so what happened as a result of this was the actual sheriff who shoved him was the one that was trying to sue Mr. Ujiri for being physically aggressive to him. Now, the reporter, Brian Windhorst, said that he was there at the same time, not at that exact location, but the clip shows him, if you will, almost feeling bad or even lamenting in a way, because he said, man, I feel really bad about this because why? I walked on the court and I didn't even have my ID, right? Which goes back to the space that we're in right now. When you start talking about black, white, if you want to call it privilege or benefit, you know, you can put whatever tag that you want to put on it. But it is a thing right now to where how can the president of basketball operations of a professional team, had a suit on, had his credentials, get shoved twice, not allowed to get on the floor to celebrate with his team? My question to the panelists is, how does this happen?
All right, I'll start. So nobody will want to start. First, he didn't just get pushed twice. He got pushed twice and told, get the F back. And what's happening is Isabel Wilkins has just written a new book on caste. The deputy knew that 75% of the NBA is black. The players are black. But there are, if I'm correct, only 4 executives of the NBA are black. So he was sure that everybody who needed to be on the court celebrating was on the court. And this man was coming. Now remember, he makes $5 million a year. He's the president of basketball operations, and he cannot get on the floor because of a white police officer that thinks he doesn't belong. That's painful. But what I want to do today is lean into the pain. What does it feel like when you have all of this achievement and you are treated as if you have none?
Okay, so I want to piggyback on that, Bishop, if I can, and I want to ask my other two panelists, how do you think he is feeling for that to happen to him with his resume? You know, he's in my tax bracket. He's making $5 million a year. You know what I'm saying? I can relate to that. Okay, I can relate to those type of problems, right? But talk about how he's feeling.
Well, I can't.
Being the president of basketball operations for a team that you helped to construct to win this title, and literally not being allowed to celebrate with them. You know, Judge Parker, Jocelyn, how do you think he was feeling just as a man that has this title, that has this acclaim?
I do not know what it feels like to make $1 million of anything, but I do know what it feels like to be qualified in a situation and to be questioned, or to even be belittled because of the way I look. And the assumption is that I don't belong, I don't comprehend what's happening. And so I do know what that is. That is very common for African Americans in America. And I would just venture to say probably people of African descent around the world that live in places that do not accept them as they are. The assumption is that because of the way we look, there's no way, it's just not possible for you to be a part of this. Essentially, you don't belong. And so I've had that happen many a time. I am also a musician, and a university wanted to use one of my songs for their graduation. And I remember being asked, and I was actually a student there as well at the time. And I remember being asked who the song belonged to over and over again. And all he had to do was go to copyright.gov. I wrote the song. But they would not treat me fairly. And when it came down to it, they used the song, but up until the day of using it, they would not accept the fact that I was articulate enough to write something like that. So I understand how he feels, and it really just means that no matter what you do, if you're wrapped in brown skin, it could mean that you just aren't accepted.
Okay. And Judge Parker, I want to kind of come to you from a different bent, because you watched the video, because I sent it out to everybody, and hope you watched it. How did you feel watching the video?
Angry. Just flat out angry. You know, you ask how we as panelists would feel, and it's obvious that I can't know how that would feel, because I've never been subjected to that kind of treatment, not once. And I've seen it happen. I remember, I was thinking about this the other day. I was in a store shopping for some stuff for my wife and I to use in our house. It was a Pier 1 store. Walked in the place, looked around, browsed. I was in there for 15, 20 minutes taking pictures of different tables so I could text them to my wife and say, do you like this one? Do you like that one? I didn't have one contact with one sales representative the whole time other than, hey, how are you today? Roamed all over the store. And it's not that big a store. As I was completing my purchase, a black lady came in, and instantly she was followed around that store. And you just walk out and say, we're going to get to the question, why do these things happen? But I think for people who look like me, when you see an incident like that, if you're not angry, at least receptive to the idea that you're missing something that's common, that we don't know about, then you'll miss understanding or beginning to understand. We can only begin to understand the issue and the pain that people in our community deal with on an everyday basis, which, as I said last time we were together, creates a whole lot of exhaustion and a whole lot of anger.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I appreciate that. And I wanna pitch on something for a minute, because Jocelyn was saying it, and you know, when you don't have when you have the credentials, it's sometimes not enough. And so when I was looking at him, I'm like, well, this brother's got a suit on, he's suited and booted, you know, he's got a cut, he's got an ID. What more does he need? And I think for me, for a lot of years, I felt like if I don't have a suit and a tie on, then I'm not going to be taken seriously in my role, right? And for other people, it's going to be something different. But that was my question. But it seemed like to me he checked all the boxes, right? And this goes back to the title. It's like, these are complex problems that need complex solutions. So there's no simple solution. It isn't, oh, well, he need to make a better decision, or he needs to work harder. We're kind of past that. This man is the president of basketball operations. He's achieved and he's arrived, right? He's one of 5, if you will, executives in the NBA. And so I wanna lean into what you just said here, Judge Parker. Is why do we think this keeps happening? Why is this a recurrence over and over, that it seems like it's just this slight, if you will? Why does this keep happening?
Jocelyn's wondering why I'm answering this one first. You know, it's one thing that has occurred to me as this debate has intensified throughout the country, is that we want to make broad judgments about causes and effects. And it's really difficult to make those in a way that actually lands us on exact answers. So if we could put ourselves into the mind of that deputy sheriff that was on the court in Toronto that night, or maybe it was in San Francisco, you'd want to know what was the person's life experience? Who has he ever spent any time with that doesn't look like him? What awareness does he have of his own assumptions? How was he raised? We know none of those things. At least I don't. I'm sure the media has examined those, but so we want to take a look at one person and then say, well, because this one person is this way, then other people, most people, are that way. And I think, Kemp, you hit it right. When this is a complicated situation, because individuals are uniquely complicated in their own rights. They come from their own experience, their own background, and some people wake up to these issues and some people never do. And that's what makes it so complicated. The real complicated part is what you're going to get to at the end, is like, well, what do we do? What steps can we take? And I'm sure we'll talk about that more in a minute.
Judge Parker, you have a very well articulated part of this two-pronged problem. One part of the problem is individual behavior. The second part of the problem, which we're having a great deal of trouble discussing in America today, is the systemic aspect of this. Isabel Wilkerson has just written a book called Caste. And when you talk about racism, we are now able to opt out and say, well, you know, some of my best friends are Black, so I'm not racist. Right. But when you begin to talk about caste, a system that keeps superior people superior and inferior people inferior, now you're beginning to talk about a system that you can begin to see the impact. And that deputy, let's just take him as a systemic problem first. Because we don't, like you said, I don't know what his individual situation is, but I don't think he had a lot of problem identifying 75% of the people on the court are Black. 4 executives are Black. So I don't know who this man is. He probably could be an imposter. And so therefore, it's my job to keep him from going out there because I know he doesn't belong. Well, where does that come from? It comes from not only individual animus or bias. It comes from a system that is intent on keeping certain people in their place.
And if I may add to that, Bishop, he has this internal conversation that he's having with himself, not even paying attention to the fact that the gentleman is pulling out his credentials. So this conversation that he's having with himself internally is completely disconnected from what he's watching this man do. Pull out his credentials as he's approaching to do the appropriate thing, which is to say, he may not know who I am, so I'm going to show my credentials to this gentleman so that he can let me onto the court. So all of this is happening in his mind, totally disconnected from what he's watching this gentleman do. And that's the thing that we have to talk about and we need to contend with, is that all of these conversations and this dialogue is happening internally, totally not paying attention to the things that are happening. People are losing their lives because of what is happening in this, I don't like to say unconscious bias because I don't know that it's unconscious. But this bias is speaking louder than the sensory experience that I'm having in this moment. And it should never be that way. And we have to begin to do some systemic changes in how, I don't want to say law enforcement is trained, but to understand what is happening internally with each individual as they are being trained. Is this a person who sees people and not just their bias? We all have, I was in a conversation yesterday evening. We all have biases. We all have them. But what I'm seeing should not take a secondary seat to what my bias. I should be able to see this gentleman is approaching. He's doing the appropriate thing, to let me know that he's supposed to be here. Okay, let me calm down and let him pass. There were other people, as we said before, who did not do that. So I think that is a thing. How do we connect or hire people who don't live at the edge of their bias, who are present enough to differentiate between the two?
I appreciate that. Now, there was a question that came up, and I want to give the actual person who's asking that question or put it in the chat to ask you all just personally from her perspective. Not that I'm giving away my job because I gotta have something to do too, but I do, Denise, want to give you an opportunity to come and ask the panel that question.
Okay, thanks, Kemp, and I apologize. I have to jump off for a 2:00 meeting. But Judge Parker, when you talked about your experience at Peer Import and you acknowledged the fact that that would never happen to you, but you saw that it happened, what do you think you could have done, or did you feel comfortable saying anything to that person? I'm working with my colleagues how to be anti-racist versus non-racist, which means we do nothing, but anti-racist we put into action. And so I'm working with my colleagues to feel more comfortable to say something. How can we help others become more comfortable to speak up?
Well, that's a great question. When I had that episode, and I think when we were on the panel discussion 4 months ago, I mentioned that I've kind of been on my own journey. Maybe it's a journey too late in life. Not too late in life to make a difference, but I wish it would have started decades earlier. But I was just at the beginning stages of the journey at that point to even recognize what was happening. Probably before that, I wouldn't even noticed it, which I confess. So I noticed it, and I've thought a lot since then. What could I have done in that moment to try to make the situation better? And there's different options, and you could go up and confront the saleswoman, or you could potentially go ask the manager. That might be a better course. But what I think I probably would do at this stage is go ask that sales representative for some help, get her away from the other customer, and say to her, I shopped in your store for the last 20 minutes and you never followed me around. And as soon as this lady came in the store, Your Honor. And I don't know if you're trained to do that. I don't know what the issue is, but I can tell you as one shopper, I find that to be deeply offensive. And why shouldn't she be able to shop just the way I did? So I think that if I had to confront that situation again, that's probably what I would have done.
Anybody else would like to chime in with that question?
Yeah, I like to say to the intelligent sister who asked that question that sometimes I just got off another Zoom with some other pastors and some white pastors. Sometimes whites are shocked at what they see because America has a historic amnesia about slavery and Jim Crow and those things. So they really are taken aback. Like, did that just happen? Because they're not quite aware of what it is that we experience every day. So I think that's the reason sometimes whites don't act, because they're kind of shocked. I'm not sure how to respond to that, because it's painful for America to look at its history. And we have a very difficult time doing so.
Because I think on one end, that does show some progress, right? It does show progress that we are actually acknowledging that these things are happening. Then the next step becomes, okay, now what do I do about it? And I want to go back to something that really started us off with us at Love Akron, really using this platform to connect versus collide about these type of things. It's like, we have to get out of the doing culture. We got to get out of, oh man, what do we do? What do we do? Sometimes it's just sit back and notice and then acknowledge that this is happening. Once you are able to do those type of things, now it begins the next stage of, okay, this is something I can do to educate myself, as Judge Parker was talking about. So I really loved the transparency and the vulnerability, but also from you, Jocelyn, I wanted to mention, you know, with your song. Thank you for sharing that with us, because I didn't know that, right? And a lot of people wouldn't have known that. But these are real things that happen to good people, to real people. Like, this is not some make-believe, oh, I read it in this book. No, these are actual, if you will, testimonies of people. So I really, really appreciate you, Jocelyn, leaning into that. I think we have one more person that has a question on here, Susie Cottrell. Did I pronounce that name right? Susie, if you want to present your question to the panelists, we'd love that.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry, I didn't know if I got a, okay, here we go. Yeah, thank you so much. I hear an echo. But yeah, you may all have seen my chat message come up. But the main point that I'm keep returning to in a lot of different groups that I've been in over the years is that people need to be listened to. And I know that sounds very obvious, but it's very rarely done. And if it is done, it's done in little sound bites. And to have the opportunity for our Black, Indigenous, people of color in our community to tell a story as long as it takes, without interruption, without defensiveness, without even questions at some point, at a certain point, just let someone talk and let them know that you're listening. And that's listening in the atmosphere of love. And that has incredible healing. And even if you're speaking in a group where you feel like I'm preaching to the choir, you know, these people, everyone is still being enlightened. And just the telling of your story, your whole story in that environment where you feel safe, that's key, is so healing. And even within the choir is going to learn something, you know. Even if they've been doing this work for years, they'll hear another thing that is another piece of the puzzle in a way that they can help or respond to your story that relates to other people in your community as well. And, you know, just, you know, to wrap it up, not talk too long, but sometimes we talk about these complex problems. Sometimes the solution is simple. And I know some people laugh at the idea of, I don't think you all would, but the idea of love as being an answer, but it really is. And it's really pretty easy to do if you have an open heart. And, you know, I would like more opportunity for that, to just come and listen, you know, versus me talking or chiming in with my questions, or, you know, just, I'm here to listen, you know, and I think that we need a lot of that. And I think it has tremendous impact. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Susie.
If I may,
I'm sorry, darling. Go ahead.
if I may speak to that, the willingness to listen takes a lot of humility that some people do not possess yet. They, as I said before, I was in a conversation last night, and one of the things I said was my hope was that, and it was about racial relations. But my hope is that when an African American or person of African descent speaks about their experience in America, on a personal level, on a systemic level, that people listen with an open heart and be willing to be right, be willing to be wrong, be willing to experience a shift in some of their core beliefs, because understanding that some of the things that have, let's just talk about racial ideologies. They have been passed down from generation to generation inside of families. And so sometimes people don't want to leave behind an outmoded understanding, because they feel like in leaving that behind, they're leaving behind their loved one. And so they feel like it's a question of, you know, this is my family, this is what we believe, this is, you know, this is right, and they love me, they would never tell me anything wrong. Well, they could if their understanding is also incorrect. So, you know, it takes a lot of humility. It takes a willingness to be wrong. It takes a willingness to leave behind things that are outmoded or just plain incorrect. Just, you know, so if a person doesn't possess those things, they're not willing to necessarily listen to someone like me, because they believe what they've been taught, and they have internalized those things so deeply that it has become true, whether it's actually true or not. And so my hope is that people would come to a situation like this the way that Susie has. But it doesn't happen often because people are not willing to do those. They're not willing to do those things.
I wholeheartedly agree with her, with Jocelyn. That's a wonderful perspectives, and listening is a great equalizer, brings us together at the same level. I'm going to push a little bit further and say, I need you to, according to Romans 12:15, weep with me. There are a lot more people who are starting to listen, and that's wonderful. But you need to weep. You need to feel what I feel right now. And when you do that, now we're listening at a deeper level. And I agree with all that Susan said, all that Jocelyn said. I'm affirming that. I'm just saying we need to start to push into, I heard you. But sometimes when people hear us, then they want to fix us. Well, here's the answer to the problem. Here's what we need to do. Here's where we're going to go next. Well, wait a minute. Can you feel what I'm feeling? Can you feel the pain of what I'm feeling? Because if you can, we're going to probably come to a much better, closer agreement, closer touching as persons. I'm not a problem to be fixed. I'm not just something to get this straight. I'm a person who is alive and hurting and needs to be related to.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on that as well.
Go ahead, Judge, jump in.
Because, you know, what Bishop Johnson's just directly referred to is the time-tested tradition of lament. And when you begin to take a look at this very complicated, very long-standing issues, and you do try to think of what are things we can do better, you realize that you don't solve 400 years worth of oppression with a thought or two or a program or two. And it's going to take a lot of people educating themselves, listening, and lamenting. And I just came across a book I'm going to hold it up so you can see it. But when Bishop Johnson talks about Romans referring to weep with me, he might appreciate this book.
I just read it.
I just got it. I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it. I literally just got it.
You'll enjoy it.
I'm sure I will. So, but there is another aspect. So Susie talked about how important it is to listen. As I've done my reading and begin to understand issues, I also recognize that I have to be sensitive to the fact that, you know, my Black brothers and sisters are not obligated to teach me. You know, every person of African descent or who's Black in this country is not obligated to drag along people who have been a part of the majority culture their whole lives and who are just now waking up. I mean, many of them are gracious enough to do it. And we should be very thankful if somebody's gracious enough to open up their pain and help us to listen, as Bishop Johnson said. So one of the things I want to encourage people who are participating today who may look like me is we also have to take the mantle on ourselves to get with it and do our own reading. And, you know, it's, you know, after you've read a book or 2 or 10 or 30, you name it, you know, the common themes that come out of the feelings and the treatments and the results repeated over and over and over again. It doesn't matter who you're reading. You know, I took it upon myself this summer to read the Autobiography of Malcolm X. And, you know, people are like, you read that? I said, well, yeah, I read that. But what it taught me is that there are a lot of people in the country who, if you look at his story, it's a story of pain, basically, and how he responded to that. But you can go to other people, other authors that maybe take a different approach in how they want to resolve the issue. But the common theme you get is pain. And you do begin to understand that it does provoke you to lament and weep because you realize that we've created such a complicated, deep problem that we're all going to be living in it for a while. It's not going to get solved in our generation. I do feel like a door has been opened now that didn't open before. And it's wonderful that we're having these conversations, and we need to keep having them. But each of us individually, and I'm speaking to my folks, we got to get with it, and we got to learn.
Let me come behind Judge Parker with that wonderful statement he just made. Let me speak to my folks. We're tired. We're tired of the conversation, tired of going through as some whites are. But if we don't go to God and say, how long, oh Lord, and lament, we're not going to get the strength we need to continue these conversations in love, to continue these conversations with tolerance, with compassion. And I think the conversations need to go on. But people are getting awful tired, and we need supernatural help right now.
Man, this is really great stuff. We have got Robert on here. Robert has a question. Robert, I want you to be able to present your question to our panelists today. Thanks so much for being with us.
Okay, well, my question is that the system, as we refer to it, is comprised of individuals. So why do we talk about the system rather than the racism of the individuals? You know, I don't really see organizations, other than some very few, that themselves have policies that are explicitly biased. Isn't it really coming from the individuals within those organizations?
If I may speak to that, I'm trying to find a way to start what I want to say. African American people are not afforded the ability to be seen as individuals. Okay, and that started in slavery. We're a conglomerate. We're a thing. Okay, and so we don't always get the opportunity to be considered as individuals. So it's kind of a unfair leveling to look at it that way. And actually, the reason why we have the issues that we have now is because of the way the system was constructed to people who look like me. So that's kind of, we can't really say that well, this person is this way and this person is that way. The entire system was created, as Bishop said earlier, to keep those who are considered superior superior and those who are considered inferior inferior. That's the way it was constructed. So it wasn't based upon one person or that person or this person. So we cannot really have the conversation, and that's our government. That's, you know, the way our society is run. And so we have to talk about the whole thing. When it comes to companies or policies and things like that, you can't just point to one individual, because if it's a policy for myself, I create policy where I work for certain things. And every policy that I create has to be vetted, has to be approved. So if it's created by one individual, the company itself, the board, whomever, they have to approve it. That's a group of people. So we can't really look at it as individuals. We have to look at it as the entire thing that we're talking about. And I think if we start there, we can get to the individuality of it. But we have to face it head on, that it's not just an individual problem, it's a systemic problem. And once we begin to work with the system of it, then we can begin to talk about how it affects the individuals that are connected to the system. If that makes sense. I don't know if that
I think you're hitting it. I want to piggyback on what you're saying. There is a wonderful book called The Color of Law, written by Richard Rothstein. And in the book, he covers the 12 legal areas where the country, America, has de jure laws in place to make sure that African American people of African descent are kept down and in certain ways discriminated against. So when we talk about this, often we're talking as if we're talking kind of ethereal. This is not ethereal. These are 12 laws. I'll give you one example. I live in a suburb where if I go to that suburb today and I look on the books of the suburb, I can find laws that say I should not be allowed to live there. They're still on the books. Those kinds of things are not, they're not laws by individuals. They're not laws by a couple of companies. These are laws by America that have been in place for hundreds of years, and they're not off the books.
And may I say to that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Justin.
May I say to that, those laws have been covered by amendments. They still exist. And I don't think that we understand that when amendments happen, that doesn't erase what's there. It's just saying, my bad, maybe we should, oops. That's what it is. It's not a change. I'm sorry, go ahead, Judge, I apologize.
What I was going to add in is, in looking at this issue, whether we're dealing with individuals or systems, you can also approach it from the back end, which is to look at results in our nation that have existed or that exist right now. So you could look at, I read an article this morning, the average or the median household income for white citizens, $82,000. Black citizens, 53. Share of people 25 years old and older who have completed 4 years of college. For whites, 36%. For blacks, 26%. Home ownership rates for blacks, 73%. For whites, 42%. The other way around. Whites, 73%. Blacks, 42%. People gone to prison. Sentenced male prisoners per 100,000 residents of the corresponding groups. Blacks, 2,272 per 100,000. Whites, 392. So you can look at the results of how the country exists, and you can look at statistics like that, and you can say, well, let's talk about household income. What could account for that vast disparity in household income? Can we say that over the tens of millions of people that household income disparity exists, that it all comes down to somebody who didn't try hard in school, or somebody who simply wasn't gifted with intelligence at birth or something. Now, you have to assume that there are gifted Black people, gifted white people. There's people who are Black who are not as intelligent, and there's people who are white who are not as intelligent. All these ups and downs of individual capability apply across racial groups. And if you think otherwise, then you got to go back and re-examine what your basic premise is about Caucasians and non-Caucasians in the first place, which is a separate topic. But you're not going to be able to find individual explanations that can account for such vast disparities in outcomes. And so one way to consider this issue of individual versus systemic results is to look at the results. It simply cannot all come down to individual capabilities accounting for that difference. That just doesn't make sense. There's no biological justification for it, but there's plenty of societal justification for how people have been treated. And it could be that somebody lives in an area where the schools are not as good. Well, why do they live in that area? Going to Bishop Johnson's point that he just made, The Color of Law explains why, that book explains why America is segregated, especially in the cities. There's an explanation for it. So that gets back to my point from a few minutes ago.
Bringing up Ron?
It behooves us to just get with it and learn these things.
Man, that's good stuff. I really appreciate that. We're going to take one more question. But, man, we have a question from Terrence Davis. I want to acknowledge Terrence. Terrence, thank you so much for your question. I'm going to pass this question along to our panelists because it is a very complex question. I want to give it the time and the thought that it needs. And so Terrence, thank you so much for that. And I will make sure personally that we get you back that answer to the question that you're presenting. The last question we want to ask is going to be coming from Ron Rett. I think Ron might be on with us. But if Ron is not, I'm just going to read Ron's question, okay? His question is, many people I encounter are unwilling to change or learn. How can we identify people who are open to learn? I want to present that as the last question to our panelists.
As I would like to speak to that. It was said before, to educate yourself before you engage a person of African descent to have this type of conversation. For me personally, that's how I identify a person who is ready to have the conversation, is if they have done their own work. I've said personally and professionally, I will not have conversations about race with someone who has not read a book or read several books or read articles or watched the many available documentaries or all of these resources that are available to them. I won't engage them, because what it shows is that, one, you respect me enough and people like me enough to educate yourself to have an informed conversation. It is not an African-American person's responsibility to teach you anything. That's been said. And so if you, because we're already tired, as Bishop said, it is not our job to educate you. There's everything around you. It's available if you want to engage the conversation. But at the same time too, if you're going to respect me enough to do the work and then have the conversation, then it makes me believe that you are willing, or at least on the road, to begin to weep with me, as Bishop also said. And there's also Judge Parker had the book for it. So, and I need to read that book. But to be able to do that, there has to be a personal investment. And if I don't see that, I won't have the conversation.
Outstanding. First of all, I want to go back for a moment and thank Judge Parker for saying something that whites generally don't say, and that is, it's not my job to educate you. You need to educate yourself. But I think we're looking for hearts. If I were white, and I'm not sure I can even relate to that, if I was white, I'd be looking for Black folks who are open and have a heart. as a Black person, I'm looking for whites who are open, who have a heart, who want to weep with me. If I can see what your heart is, we can get past the issues and the other stuff and all that, because your heart is what's most important as a part of this. So that's who I'd be looking for. And I think you'll find out, if you're white, that African-American people are more than willing to engage you if they find out you are authentic. If you are authentic, we'll work with you. Now, if you're not authentic, that's another whole problem.
And just trying to respond from my perspective, if I were in a community of folks that look like me and I wanted to know who wanted to engage this issue and lean in and learn to weep and learn, it just happens by asking a few basic questions. What's your take on such and such topic of the day? Or what happened? What do you think about these protests? What's your view of it? These are complicated issues, and you just we don't have any idea where someone might be on the learning continuum. They might just now want to start thinking about this, or maybe they've been dealing with it for years. As Susie said, are we dealing with people that are already in the choir? Even people who are in the choir, everybody, I don't care who you are, we can learn more. We can learn more about how to do this better and how to really walk the way Christ calls us to walk, which is the ultimate issue. That's our true identity. We're all image bearers of the one who made us, and our identity is in Christ if you're a Christ follower. And if you share that, you can talk a lot, and so you can solve some issues and join some hearts.
Amen. Can I add one more book, Coach?
Yes.
The book is called Prophetic Lament by Soong Chan Ra, who's a Korean theologian. And prophetic lament adds even another aspect and layer to the lament.
Thank you, man. We appreciate that, Bishop. Appreciate all of our panelists today. And, you know, what's beautiful about this is that we just get to have a conversation without any of the additives on top of it, right? I can remember when we first started this and people registered and we had all these people registering and all that stuff was really great, right? But we're at the point in time where we need to be in the boat with people that really want to do this work, right? And it's going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be the work that we thought it was going to be. It's not going to be the march. It's not going to be the rally. It's not going to be the protest. But if you kind of heard it, the work was in what they were saying today. We're going to start to feel and to lament with one another. You know, Susie talked about this when she was on. She said, yeah, you know, I think it is simple. I think it is about listening and loving. Yeah, but when you really love somebody, love is a complicated thing, right? Because I got to love past your isms. I got to love past stuff or your stuff. My wife, Stacy, shout out to Stacy. She's home with our 2 3-year-olds right now. But she had to love past all of my baggage that I brought into our marriage. She had to love me past that, right? And so that made our relationship complicated, right? But I had some complicated stuff coming into the marriage. You know, I witnessed some complicated things as a child looking at my parents' marriage, okay? And so we have to understand racism, systemic injustice, all these things are complicated problems that it's going to take a very complicated solution. And it's going to start with us doing the work. And a part of that work is, man, we need to be able to feel with one another. If I can feel with you, now I can sit and I can grieve and I can lament with you. And guess what? To Bishop's point, it won't be artificial. It'll be real. It will be authentic. Why? Because now you've allowed me and we have intimacy. And that's what relationship, that's what listening, that's what those things give us for one another. And so we're going to start that process. So, you know, as you sit back in your own now, you think about, okay, Kim, but what are you guys doing? And I tell you, hey, you know what we're doing? We're learning how to feel and we're going to lament with one another. That's not a sexy thing. That's not anything. Ain't nobody lining up in the feelings line or in the lamenting line. But what I believe is, and I believe this along with our panelists, this is what it's going to take for us to break through to that next level. And so my panelists, they've already agreed to be on with me for the next 18 months, so they can't get out of this. I'm just joking, they didn't, but they're going to be on next month with us because they brought it up. Here's the thing, this is why they're going to be on next month, because they brought it up. And because they brought it up, we're going to continue this conversation about how do we feel with one another, and then how do we lament together, right? Because if we can do that, man, that's where things are going to be earth-shattering that are going to happen. And again, it's not the sexy thing, right? It's not the protest. It's not the big rally. It's not all that, man. But there's an intimacy in that relationship that now is beginning to build and to form between two people. And so we thank you so much for being on today. Man, panelists, thank you so much for your time, for your knowledge, for your vulnerability of just being with us today and sharing. Next Wednesday, we'll be having the next step to this conversation, to where we'll break you down into small groups and have you discuss some of what you heard today. And we're really excited about that because it gives you another opportunity to begin to form relationships with others and to begin to talk and to feel together so that, hey, we can lament together. Last thing I'm going to say, and we're going to turn you loose. I don't know if anybody ever saw what Doc Rivers said. Doc Rivers is the head coach of the Los Angeles Clippers. And I know we're all basketball today, right? And we got a football game this week, but that's another story. Y'all pray for me now. But what he said after one of their games, and he was beginning this process of lamenting, he said, wow, it amazes me how we continue to love this country when this country doesn't love us back. And just in case you haven't seen it, what I encourage you to do is go on YouTube, Doc Rivers, D-O-C Rivers, like rivers of water. And what you saw is that when he said, why we, and he's meaning we as black, brown people, why we keep loving this country, America, when, man, this country, America, doesn't love us back. Man, that was a lament. He was feeling something there, and he got emotional. Like that's where we have to be able to feel, and those are the places we have to be willing to go with one another, to lament well with each other and to grow and to be deeper with one another. So, man, we're just excited.
Hey, Brother
Thank
Kemp,
you so much. Yes.
Can I just throw one thing in there?
Please.
One huge mistake that people like me can make when they hear something like what Doc Rivers said is to try to explain why he's wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's what he's
doubt.
feeling. And, to Jocelyn's point, we're never going to be able to learn to feel if we try to explain why we're right and he's got 100 reasons why he's wrong. In Doc Rivers' mind, he is right. And he may well be right too.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And may
Brother
I say,
Kemp, I want to add, because he said that, excuse me, Sister Jocelyn, because he said that, I want to just add this one thing. This is what I teach people in our church and couples. There's only two things you can do with a feeling. Only two. Accept it or reject it. And when you reject the feeling, you reject the person. So you can't change anybody else's feelings. They feel what they feel. You can either accept them or reject them.
and may I also say, you were talking about love, Coach, and love is not just a feeling, but it does, when someone loves you, it moves you to action to reciprocate that love.
Come on now.
So when you have someone who wants to feel with you and to get into that intimate space of understanding you, in this discussion, love also means action. I love this person enough to be moved to do something on their behalf.
Man, that's a great segue into what we always say. And I joked about this last week. I said it was funny. Years ago, man, I used to hate Akron. Now, God called me to leave an organization called Love Akron. Ain't that funny? But to add on what Jocelyn's saying, love is the decision that we make. I made a decision to love Stacy, to love our children. I made a decision. And so what we're saying is we got to make decisions to love one another. And we always end like this. We always say, if you don't do anything else today to make sure that you love Akron. Now, I know sometimes people think, geez, we say and we laugh, but think about that for a minute. You're making a decision to love Akron. Not just the city, but every person within the city. everything that's happening. You're making what you're saying is you're declaring and decreeing that I'm going to love Akron. Red, yellow, black, and white, all is precious in his sight. I'm making a decision to love Akron. So we're going to sign off here. If you don't do anything else today, make sure that you love Akron. Thank you all so much for being with us. Thank you, panelists. We'll see you next month, and you will be here. Judge Parker, you can't go nowhere. I won't let you escape. Bishop, you can't escape. Jocelyn, you can't escape. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you again, everyone that is involved and has been a part of these conversations. 2 quick things. Make sure that you come next week. We'll be sending out a link. And then as well as with that link, we'll be sending out a survey talking about, hey, like what are other topics that we can tackle together. But we're honored that you'd spend time with us. And just thank you so much for spending time loving Akron.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.